I stood alone in that courtroom, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the wooden railing in front of me. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with that particular frequency that sets your teeth on edge, casting everything in a harsh, unforgiving glow that made everyone look slightly jaundiced and tired. The walls were oak-paneled, dark and imposing, lined with portraits of stern-faced judges from decades past, who seemed to stare down at me with disapproval. Across the aisle, my daughter Madison sat with her lawyer, Bradley Morrison, a man in an expensive suit. I later learned it was custom-made Italian wool, probably cost more than my monthly pension would be, who looked like he charged more per hour than I used to make in a week at the machine shop. She was smirking. Actually smirking at me, her own father, the man who had held her in the delivery room 32 years ago and promised to always protect her. The man who had walked her down the aisle at her wedding just 4 years prior. That smirk was full of confidence, of certainty that she was about to win, that she deserved to win. Behind her sat my ex-wife Patricia, her hand resting on Madison's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity that felt like a betrayal deeper than the divorce had ever been. My son Connor was there too, looking uncomfortable in a suit he'd clearly borrowed. It was too big in the shoulders. And my youngest, Sophia, sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. The gallery was packed. Word had spread through our small town like wildfire. "Did you hear about Bob Grant? His daughter is suing him for $700,000. The local newspaper had run a story with the headline, "Daughter takes father to court over broken promises." They'd made me sound like a monster. Half the town thought I was a miser hoarding wealth while my children suffered. The other half, a much smaller half, thought Madison was out of her mind. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. I recognized faces in the crowd. Jim Martinez from the machine shop, though he wouldn't look at me. The Hendersons from church. Marie Kowalski, who used to babysit my kids. They were all there to witness my humiliation or my vindication. I wasn't sure which they were hoping for. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and reading glasses perched on her nose, cleared her throat. The sound echoed through the silent courtroom like a gunshot. Everyone stopped their whispering, their shuffling. The room became so quiet I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, counting down the seconds until my fate would be decided. She looked directly at Madison, and I saw something in her expression that made my heart skip a beat. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't the "you poor thing" look that so many people had given Madison over the past months. It was skepticism. Hard, judicial skepticism. "Before we begin," Judge Reeves said, her voice calm but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut glass, "I have one question for the plaintiff." Madison straightened in her chair, that confident smile still plastered on her face. She glanced at her lawyer, who gave her a small nod. They'd prepared for this. They'd rehearsed every possible question, every scenario, or so they thought. "Why?" the judge continued, her eyes never leaving Madison's face. "Did you tell this court that your father owed you this money?" The smile faltered. Just for a second, but I saw it. So did the judge. Her lawyer shifted in his seat, his expensive leather briefcase suddenly requiring his full attention. He'd been reviewing documents, but now his hands stilled. Madison opened her mouth, then closed it. She swallowed. Your Honor, he promised—" "I'm asking why you believe he owes you," the judge interrupted, "not what you claim he promised. Why does a father owe his adult daughter $700,000? The courtroom, packed with observers who had come to watch what the local paper had dubbed the entitled daughter case, held its collective breath. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the court reporter, an older woman who'd probably seen everything in her career, looked up from her stenography machine with interest. Madison's face went through a series of micro-expressions: confusion, frustration, calculation. Her mouth opened again. Because I'm his daughter. Because family helps family. Because he has the money and I need it." "I see," Judge Reeves said, and something in her tone made my chest tighten with hope. "We'll return to that." She called for a brief recess, and everyone stood as she left the courtroom. The moment she was gone, the room erupted in whispers. Madison turned to her lawyer, her face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. Patricia was whispering urgently to her. Connor caught my eye for just a moment before looking away, his expression miserable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I ended up here, standing in a courtroom while my own daughter tried to legally rob me of $700,000, you need to know how it all began. You need to understand the slow accumulation of entitlement, the gradual shift from daughter to adversary, from family to lawsuit. You need to understand how love can curdle into resentment, and how the person you'd take a bullet for can become the person holding the gun. It was a Tuesday evening in March when everything started to unravel. The sky was that particular shade of gray that promises rain but never delivers, and there was still a bite of winter in the air despite the calendar insisting spring had arrived. Madison had called earlier that week, her voice bubbling with excitement, insisting that the whole family come over for dinner. "I have the most amazing news, Dad," she'd said, practically singing the words. "You're going to be so proud of me." I should have known something was off. Madison didn't do family dinners. She was 32 years old, married to a tech consultant named Derek, who I'd never quite warmed to. Something about the way he smiled without his eyes engaging, like he was always calculating something, and usually too busy with her lifestyle brand Instagram account to bother with her old man. She had over 80,000 followers, she told me once with pride, people who wanted to know what she ate for breakfast and where she bought her throw pillows. But I was hopeful. Stupidly, naively hopeful. Maybe she was pregnant. Maybe she'd finally gotten that promotion she'd been chasing at the marketing firm where she worked part-time. Maybe, just maybe, she wanted to rebuild the bridge that had been slowly crumbling between us since her mother and I divorced 8 years ago. Since Patricia had decided she wanted to find herself, and that finding herself meant not being married to a machinist who came home with grease under his fingernails. I drove to their apartment in the city, a sleek 2-bedroom in one of those modern buildings with a doorman and a lobby that looked like a hotel. They rented it for $3,400 a month. I knew because Madison had complained about it once, saying how unfair it was that rents were so high, as if someone else was responsible for her choice to live in the most expensive neighborhood in the city. My old pickup truck, a 2003 Ford F-150 with 230,000 miles on it, looked out of place among the Teslas and BMWs in the parking garage. The attendant, a young kid with a hipster beard, actually smirked when I pulled in. But I'd long since stopped caring about things like that. I'd worked as a machinist for 37 years, saved every penny I could, and lived modestly. My truck ran fine. The engine was solid. The transmission had been rebuilt once by me in my own garage. That's all that mattered. Madison opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been watching through the peephole. She was wearing a designer dress. I'd learned to recognize them over the years, the ones with tags that made your eyes water, in a deep burgundy that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. Her hair was professionally styled, swept up in some complicated arrangement that had probably taken an hour and a salon visit. "Daddy," she squealed, and the word felt wrong coming from a 32-year-old woman. She kissed my cheek, leaving a lipstick mark I'd find later. Come in, everyone's here." Everyone, it turned out, meant Derek, my ex-wife Patricia, and my 2 other children, Connor and Sophia. Connor was 28 now, working as a middle school teacher and barely making ends meet on a teacher's salary that was somehow considered acceptable by a society that claims to value education. He looked tired, like he always did during the school year, with the particular exhaustion that comes from trying to convince 13-year-olds that algebra matters. Sophia was 25, still figuring out her life path, waiting tables while she found herself. Apparently, it was a family tradition now, this finding yourself business. She was taking online classes in graphic design, or maybe it was digital marketing this month. She changed career aspirations like some people changed socks. They both looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes as I entered. Connor gave me a weak smile and a half wave. Sophia stared at her phone like it held the secrets of the universe. Patricia, my ex-wife, sat on the expensive sectional sofa that Madison had once told me cost $8,000. She looked good, I had to admit. Yoga and green smoothies and whatever else she'd discovered in her journey of self-discovery had been kind to her. She gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Robert," she said, my name sounding like an accusation. "Patricia." Derek emerged from the kitchen carrying a wine bottle that probably cost more than the entirety of my weekly grocery budget. He was wearing designer jeans and a button-up shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to show off his Apple Watch, the expensive one that tracks your heartbeat and probably judges you for eating carbs. "Bob, good to see you, man." He'd never called me Bob before. I'd always been Mr. Grant. This new familiarity set off alarm bells. "Can I pour you some wine? It's a Pinot Noir from a boutique vineyard in Willamette Valley. Small production, really exclusive." "Just water, thanks," I said. I'd learned years ago that expensive wine tastes the same as cheap wine to me, like grapes that went bad. The apartment was warm, almost too warm, and smelled like catered food. Rich, complicated smells that made my stomach rumble despite my growing unease. Dinner was elaborate, served family style on platters that were brought out one after another like we were at some fancy restaurant. Herb-crusted salmon that Derek explained had been wild-caught that morning from sustainable fisheries. Roasted vegetables, heirloom carrots, purple cauliflower, Brussels sprouts with pancetta that had names and pedigrees like show dogs, a salad with microgreens and edible flowers that cost more than my usual dinner of pot roast and potatoes. "This is all from Madison's favorite caterer," Derek announced, beaming like he'd cooked it himself. "They source everything locally, organic, farm to table. It's important to us to eat ethically." I nodded, pushing a piece of salmon around my plate. It was good, I had to admit, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being set up for something. The whole evening had the orchestrated feel of a performance, everyone playing their parts. Connor tried to make conversation about his students. "There's this kid, Miguel, who's really struggling with fractions. But I think if I can just—" "That's nice, honey," Patricia interrupted, not really listening. She was watching Madison, who was watching me. Sophia talked about a new coffee shop where she'd picked up shifts, something about pour-over coffee and single-origin beans. Derek nodded enthusiastically, as if this was fascinating information. But the whole time, I could feel it building, the anticipation, the tension, like everyone was waiting for something. Then came dessert, some kind of deconstructed tiramisu that arrived in individual glass vessels, each one carefully composed with layers visible through the sides. Madison personally placed one in front of each person, her movements deliberate and ceremonial. When everyone had their dessert, she picked up her wine glass and clinked it with a fork. The sound rang out, clear and sharp, and the table fell silent. All eyes turned to her. "So," she said, her eyes gleaming with an excitement that made my stomach drop. "Derek and I have done it. We've taken the leap. We've stopped just dreaming about our future and started building it. We bought a house." Connor and Sophia gasped, right on cue. It felt rehearsed. Patricia smiled, nodding like she already knew, and probably did. I felt a knot form in my stomach, hard and cold. "That's wonderful, honey," I said carefully, trying to sound enthusiastic despite my growing dread. "Where?" "Westboro Heights," Derek interjected, naming one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the state, the kind of place where entry-level homes started at over $1 million, and the homeowners association had rules about what color you could paint your mailbox. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, chef's kitchen with professional-grade appliances, home theater, finished basement. It's a dream, Bob. An absolute dream. "Wow," I said, doing the math in my head and not liking where it was going. Houses in Westboro Heights started at $1 million, easy, and went up from there, way up. That's quite an investment. You two must be doing really well at work." Madison's smile tightened, becoming something harder, more calculated. "Well, that's actually what we wanted to talk to the family about. That's why we're all here together tonight." She stood up, her movements graceful and practiced, and walked to the sideboard. She retrieved a leather folder that had been sitting there all along, positioned prominently, waiting like a loaded gun. My stomach dropped to my shoes. She placed it in front of me, not beside my plate, not at the center of the table where everyone could see. Directly in front of me, unavoidable, demanding my attention. "Dad," she said, and her voice took on that particular tone I recognized from when she was a teenager asking to borrow the car, that mix of sweetness and manipulation that had usually gotten her what she wanted back then. "You've worked so hard your whole life. 40 years at the machine shop, never taking risks, always being so responsible, so careful with money. You've built something real. You've got savings, investments. The house is paid off. You're comfortable. More than comfortable, really." I stared at the folder, not touching it, as if not touching it might make it not real. "The thing is," Madison continued, glancing at Derek, who nodded encouragingly, his face serious now, supportive husband playing his role. "We're family, and family helps family. That's what you always taught us, right? That family comes first? That we stick together? Well, it's time for you to practice what you preached, Dad. It's time for you to give back, to help the next generation get established, to invest in your children's future." "Madison," I started, but she held up a hand, silencing me like I was one of Connor's middle schoolers. "Just look at the paperwork. Please. Derek and I have worked it all out. We've been planning this for months. The house is $1.4 million. We've got a loan pre-approved with Premier Mortgage. They're the best, everyone uses them, but we need a co-signer with excellent credit. That's you, Dad. Your credit score is perfect, and we've calculated a family contribution plan. You'd provide $700,000 as a down payment. We'd handle the mortgage on the rest, and everyone wins. We get our dream home, you get to invest in your daughter's future, and eventually this all stays in the family anyway. Think of it as an early inheritance." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire, acrid and choking. $700,000. More than half the house. More than half my entire life savings. "You want me to give you $700,000, I said slowly, making sure I understood correctly, that I wasn't misinterpreting this absolute insanity. "It's not giving," Derek jumped in, leaning forward earnestly. "It's investing, in family, in Madison's future, in your grandchildren's future. This is a smart financial move for everyone involved. The neighborhood is appreciating at 15% annually. In 5 years, the house could be worth $2 million. That's your money growing, Bob." "I don't have grandchildren," I pointed out, my voice flat. "Not yet," Madison said, her smile tight and brittle. "But this house, Dad, it's perfect for raising a family. 4 bedrooms, room for at least 2 kids, maybe 3, a huge backyard for a playset, the best school district in the state. This is about planning ahead, being smart, and honestly..." She paused, and I saw something shift in her expression, something harder. "Honestly, what else are you going to do with that money? You live alone in a 3-bedroom house that's too big for you. You drive a truck that's older than my marriage. You don't travel. You don't have expensive hobbies. You eat the same 5 meals on rotation. The money is just sitting there, Dad. Sitting in a bank earning what, 2% interest? That's practically nothing. It's being wasted." "It's my retirement," I said quietly. "My security. Your daughter." Madison's voice rose, sharp enough to cut. "I'm your daughter. I'm your flesh and blood. And when Mom left you, who was there? Who called to check on you? Who made sure you weren't drinking yourself to death in that empty house?" "You were 24 and living in New York," I said, trying to keep my voice level even as my blood pressure climbed. "You weren't even in the same state." "I called. I checked on you every week." "Twice," I corrected. "You called twice. Once to tell me you couldn't make it home for Thanksgiving, and once to ask if I could lend you money for rent." Her face flushed. Patricia cleared her throat loudly, disapprovingly. "Robert, maybe you should think about this. Really think about it. Madison is right. You do have the money, and she's your eldest. You helped pay for her college, for her wedding. This is just the next step. Parents help their children. It's what families do. It's what my parents did for me." "Your parents gave you $5,000 toward a used car," I said. "Not $700,000 toward a mansion." "Times are different now," Patricia said, her voice taking on that lecturer tone she'd perfected during our marriage. "Housing prices are insane. Young people can't get ahead without help. You had it easy, Robert. You bought your house for $90,000. That same house is worth $400,000 now. Madison's generation doesn't have those opportunities. They need help." "Exactly," I said, hearing the bitterness in my own voice. "I paid $90,000. She wants $1.4 million. Maybe the solution isn't me bankrupting myself to buy her a palace. Maybe the solution is her buying what she can actually afford." I opened the folder because I had to see it, had to confirm that this was really happening. Inside was a mortgage contract, dense with legal language and highlighted sections where I was supposed to sign. A co-signer agreement that would make me legally responsible for $1 million debt, and something labeled Grant Family Contribution Plan that broke down, in cold, clinical numbers, exactly how much of my life savings they expected me to hand over. $700,000 as a family contribution. Not a loan, I noticed. Not something to be paid back. Just money I was expected to hand over because I'd had the audacity to save it. Below that were calculations showing my projected account balance after the contribution. They'd somehow gotten access to enough information about my finances to estimate what I had saved. They'd been planning this, researching, preparing their ambush. "Madison," I said quietly, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. "I can't do this." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. I felt it, a physical shift, as if someone had opened a window in midwinter. "Can't?" Madison repeated, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Or won't?" "Both," I said, closing the folder and pushing it away from me like it was contaminated. "This is everything I've saved. This is my retirement, my security, Your daughter." Madison slammed her hand on the table, making the dessert glasses jump. "I'm your daughter. Do you understand that? I'm not some stranger asking for a handout. I helped take care of you when Mom left." "You were 24 and living in New York," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "You weren't even in the state when your mother left. You called twice in 6 months." "I called. I checked on you. I cared." "Calling twice is not taking care of someone, Madison." Her face went red, splotchy with rage. "This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable. Do you know how much we've been struggling? Do you have any idea what it's like to be in your 30s and still not have your own home? To be throwing money away on rent every month, to watch everyone else our age buying houses and building equity while we're stuck in this apartment? You have a very nice apartment, I said. It's not ours. We're building someone else's wealth, and we could have our own place, our own equity, our own future, if you would just help us. Patricia cleared her throat, and when she spoke, her voice was cold and disappointed, the same tone she'd used when telling me she wanted a divorce. Robert, maybe you should think about this. Madison is right. You do have the money, and she's your eldest. You helped pay for her college, for her wedding. Exactly, I said, feeling my own anger rising now, hot and sharp in my chest. I've already helped, a lot. College was $83,000. The wedding was $22,000, the car, the study abroad, the apartment deposits, the emergency funds. I've been helping for 32 years. That was your job as a parent, Madison snapped. That's what parents do. This is different. This is about setting me up for success, real success, for the future. My job as a parent ended when you turned 18, I said. Everything after that was a gift, and I've given plenty. A gift? Madison's voice was shrill now. You think paying for my education was a gift? You think that was you being generous? That was the bare minimum, Dad. That was the absolute bare minimum any decent parent would do. I paid for 4 years at a state university, plus room and board, plus a semester in France, I said. A lot of parents can't do that. A lot of kids graduate with 6 figures of student loan debt. You graduated with 0 debt because of me. And I'm supposed to be grateful for that? For you doing your job? Yes. The word came out louder than I intended. Yes, Madison. Actually, you are supposed to be grateful. Gratitude is a normal human emotion when someone sacrifices for you, when someone works overtime for years to make sure you have opportunities they never had. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Wow. Okay, so this is about you wanting credit. You want me to bow down and thank you for doing what you were supposed to do anyway. I want you to understand that I don't owe you $700,000. My voice was rising now, too, 32 years of frustration and hurt pouring out. I don't owe you $1 million house. I don't owe you a lifestyle you haven't earned. Haven't earned? Madison laughed, bitter and harsh. Haven't earned? I work 60 hours a week building my brand. Posting pictures on Instagram is not work, Madison. The silence that followed was arctic. Sophia made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. Connor was staring at his plate like he wanted to disappear into it. Madison stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking. Get out. Madison? Derek started, but she cut him off. No, I'm done. I try to include him. I try to give him a chance to be part of our success, to invest in his own daughter's future, and this is what I get. Insults, judgment, cruelty. I'm not being cruel, I said, standing as well. I'm being realistic. You and Derek make good money. You can buy a house, just not this house. Not a $1.4 million house in the most expensive neighborhood in the state. So I should settle, Madison said. That's what you're saying. I should settle for less, live small, think small, just like you. I'm saying you should live within your means. My means would be better if my father actually helped me instead of hoarding money he's never going to use. Patricia stood up then, placing herself between us like a referee. That's enough, both of you. Robert, I think you should go. Madison, honey, take a breath. But Madison wasn't done. She grabbed the folder and thrust it at me. Take this. Read it. Think about it. Because I'm not letting this go, Dad. This is too important. This is my life. And if you can't see that your daughter's happiness and security should matter more than a bunch of numbers in a bank account. She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. Then I don't know what kind of father you are. I took the folder because she was pushing it against my chest and I had to. Madison, I love you, but I'm not doing this. Then you don't love me, she said flatly. Because if you loved me, you'd want to help me. You'd want to see me succeed. I do want that, but not like this. She turned away from me, arms crossed. Get out. Just get out. I looked at Patricia, who shook her head slightly. Don't push it, her expression said. Connor and Sophia both looked miserable, trapped between their sister and their father, probably wishing they'd never come. Derek walked me to the door, his friendly demeanor completely gone. You should reconsider, Bob. Madison's not going to let this go. She's determined. And honestly, man, it's just money. Family is more important than money. Then why is she demanding money from her family? I asked. He didn't have an answer for that. He just closed the door in my face. I stood in the hallway for a moment, holding the leather folder, trying to process what had just happened. My daughter had just tried to emotionally manipulate me into giving her $750,000, and when that failed, she'd thrown me out of her home. The elevator ride down was the longest of my life. In the lobby, the doorman nodded politely, unaware that my world had just shifted on its axis. In the parking garage, my truck looked even more pathetic next to the luxury cars, and I felt a moment of shame before pushing it away. I'd earned my truck. I'd paid for it with honest work. There was no shame in that. I drove home in silence, the folder sitting on the passenger seat like an accusation. When I got home, I threw it on the kitchen table and poured myself a whiskey I rarely drank. The house was too quiet, too empty. Patricia had taken most of the furniture when she left, and I'd never bothered to replace it. The living room had a couch and a TV. The dining room was just the table and 2 chairs. 3 bedrooms upstairs, only one of which I used. Madison was right about one thing. It was a lot of space for one person. But it was my space. Paid for, secure, mine. I opened the folder again and read through the documents more carefully. The mortgage amount, $750,000 over 30 years. Monthly payment, around $4,000, they estimated. The down payment required $700,000. My contribution, $700,000. Their contribution, 0. Wait, I read it again. They weren't even planning to put money down themselves. They wanted me to provide the entire down payment while they paid the mortgage, except the mortgage would be in my name too, because I was co-signing. If they defaulted, I'd be responsible. This wasn't an investment. This wasn't family helping family. This was them using me as a bank, with none of the protections a real bank would have. I felt sick, actually nauseous. My daughter, my little girl, who I'd taught to ride a bike and walk down the aisle, had tried to con me. The phone rang. Patricia. Robert, what were you thinking? Madison is devastated. Patricia, did you read the paperwork? Did you see what she was actually asking for? I saw a daughter asking her father for help buying a home, something that used to be normal in this country before everyone became so selfish and individualistic. She wants $700,000, Patricia. $700,000? That's not help. That's a father investing in his child's future. My father helped me buy my first car. Your father helped you with the down payment on our first house, or did you forget that? My father gave me $5,000 toward a house that cost $90,000. That's 6%. Madison wants me to give her 50% of a house that costs $1.4 million. It's not remotely the same thing. Times are different. Housing is more expensive. Young people need more help. Young people need to buy houses they can afford. Oh, so now you're an expert on what people should do. This is why we got divorced, Robert. You're so rigid, so black and white, so incapable of seeing beyond your own narrow worldview. We got divorced because you wanted to find yourself. I wanted to find myself because living with you was suffocating. Everything was always about money, about being practical, about not taking risks. Do you know what it's like being married to someone who won't even take a vacation because it's not in the budget? I was saving for our future, for our retirement. You were being a miser, and now you're doing it again, except this time you're hurting Madison, your own daughter, Robert, your flesh and blood. She'll survive not getting a mansion. She won't forgive you, Patricia said, and her voice was cold. Mark my words. You're choosing money over your daughter, and she will never forgive you for that. We'll never forgive you. She hung up. I sat there in my quiet, empty house with my whiskey and my folder full of documents and wondered when everything had gone so wrong. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning while I was in my garage organizing my tools, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my door. Robert James Grant? He asked, professional but apologetic. Yes? I'm sorry, sir. You've been served. He handed me a manila envelope and walked back to his patrol car. I stood in my doorway, holding the envelope like it might explode, and watched him drive away. Inside was a lawsuit. Madison Marie Grant Stevens versus Robert James Grant. The amount claimed $700,000. I had to sit down. Right there, in my entryway, I just sat down on the floor and read it. Then I read it again. The legal language was dense, but the gist was clear. Madison was suing me for promised financial support, based on verbal agreements and established family obligations. The complaint cited text messages, birthday cards, Christmas gifts, and conversations going back years. It claimed I had repeatedly promised to help her establish herself financially, and that I had a legal obligation to fulfill those promises. It was insane. It was also, according to the cover letter from her lawyer's office, completely serious. I called my son first. Connor, did you know about this? He sighed. Dad, Madison called me last week. She said you'd agreed to help and then backed out. She said you were going to break up the family over money. I never agreed to anything. I don't know what to believe anymore, Connor said quietly. But Dad, if you did promise her something. I didn't. Then you'll be fine in court. He didn't sound convinced. I called Sophia next. She didn't answer. She texted me an hour later. Dad, I think you should talk to Madison and work this out. This is so messy. Work it out. As if I were the one who had filed a lawsuit demanding $700,000. Over the next few days, the news spread. Small town, big scandal. My neighbors started looking at me differently. Whispers followed me to the grocery store. That's the guy who won't help his daughter. Imagine being so greedy. His poor daughter, having to sue her own father. Patricia left me a voicemail. Robert, this is embarrassing for the whole family. Just give Madison what she needs, and we can all move on. My brother called from Florida. Bobby, what the hell is going on? Mom would be rolling over in her grave. She's suing me for money I don't owe her, I tried to explain. So give her something. Compromise. Jesus, Bobby, she's your daughter. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone thought I should just pay up and make it go away. Nobody seemed to care that what Madison was doing was legal extortion. I started losing sleep. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I'd gone wrong as a father. Had I been too distant, too focused on work, too strict or not strict enough? How had my little girl, who used to sit on my lap while I read her stories, turned into someone who would do this? I looked at my bank statements. My savings, the result of 40 years of work, of skipped vacations and brown bag lunches and used furniture, of saying no to things I wanted so I could say yes to things my family needed. Every dollar represented hours of my life, pieces of my time on Earth traded for future security. And she wanted me to hand over more than half of it because she felt entitled to a house I could never have afforded at her age. I started selling things. Old tools I didn't use anymore. My father's coin collection, a vintage motorcycle I'd been restoring. I needed money for a lawyer, and good lawyers weren't cheap. I found one through a friend of a friend, a woman named Linda Chen, who specialized in family law and had a reputation for being sharp as a tack. Our first meeting didn't give me much hope. Mr. Grant, she said, reviewing the lawsuit, I'm going to be honest with you. Family law can be unpredictable. Judges have a lot of discretion, and if Madison's lawyer can convince the court that you made implied promises, that there was some kind of verbal contract or understanding, you could be in trouble. But I didn't promise her anything. Did you ever tell her you'd help her buy a house? I thought back. Maybe in general terms, parent stuff. If you ever need help, I'm here. That kind of thing. Linda winced. That could be a problem. I also told her I'd help her fly if she jumped off a roof. It was a metaphor, teaching her not to expect me to catch every fall. Do you have that in writing? Of course not. Then it didn't happen, legally speaking. Linda tapped her pen on her desk. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to document every single dollar you've ever given Madison, every contribution, every gift, every payment. We're going to show the court that you've already provided substantial financial support, well beyond any reasonable family obligation. And then we're going to let Madison talk. Let her talk? In my experience, entitled people can't help themselves. They'll say things that reveal their true motivations. The more she explains why she deserves your money, the worse she'll look. Trust me. I wanted to trust her. But as I left her office and drove home through streets where I'd lived my entire life, passing houses where people who used to wave now looked away, I felt more alone than I'd ever felt. Linda Chen wasn't kidding about documentation. Over the next month, I lived in my basement office, surrounded by boxes of old papers, bank statements, and receipts. She wanted everything, and I mean everything. I started with Madison's college expenses. I'd paid for 4 years at a state university, covering tuition, room, board, and books. Total, $83,000. I had the bank transfers to prove it. Then there was her study abroad semester in France, $12,000. Her first car, a used Honda Civic when she turned 16, $8,000. Her wedding. I'd footed half the bill when Derek's parents claimed they couldn't afford a big celebration, $22,000 for what amounted to a 6-hour party. The security deposit and first month's rent on her first apartment in New York, $4,000. Emergency dental work when she was 26 and between jobs with no insurance, $6,000. A laptop when hers crashed during graduate school, $1,500. Gifts, birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, graduation gifts. I estimated conservatively, 30 years of gifts at an average of $500 per year, $15,000. The list went on and on. By the time I finished, I'd documented $223,472 in direct financial support. Over $250,000 I'd given to Madison throughout her life, not counting the countless smaller expenses I couldn't document. The meals out, the gas money, the times I'd slipped her $100 when she mentioned money was tight. Linda reviewed my documentation with growing satisfaction. "This is good, Robert. This is very good. No reasonable judge would look at this and think you failed in your parental obligations." "Will it be enough?" I asked. "It should be. But there's something else I want to ask you. You said your mother passed away a few years ago, right?" 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry. Did she leave a will?" "Yes, but I don't see what—" "Humor me. Do you have a copy?" "I did, in a file cabinet upstairs. I'd barely looked at it since her funeral. She'd left her modest estate to her 3 children equally. My share had been about $90,000, which I'd put directly into savings." Linda read through it carefully, then looked up at me with an odd expression. "Robert, did you read the codicil?" "The what?" "This addendum. It was added 6 months before she died." She turned the document around and pointed to a paragraph I'd skimmed over, assuming it was just legal boilerplate. But as I read it now, really read it, my breath caught in my throat. "I, Margaret Grace Grant, being of sound mind and body, hereby establish that the inheritance bequeathed to my son Robert James Grant shall be held in a protected trust, shielded from all claims, liens, lawsuits, or demands by any party, including but not limited to family members, creditors, or legal actions. This protection extends to all assets Robert has acquired through his own labor and savings. It is my wish that Robert's financial security remain intact, especially in circumstances where family members may seek to claim funds beyond reasonable need." "Mom," I whispered. "You knew." Linda leaned back in her chair. "It's not uncommon. Parents sometimes sense when one child might try to take advantage. This codicil doesn't directly impact Madison's lawsuit since she's going after your personal savings, not your inheritance. But it shows a pattern. It shows your mother understood you needed protection." "From my own daughter," I said bitterly. "Yes." I thought about my mother in her final months, the long conversations we'd had while I sat by her hospital bed. She'd asked me about Madison several times in a way that seemed pointed. "How is she treating you, Bobby? Is she grateful for all you've done?" I'd brushed off her concerns, insisting everything was fine. She'd known better. "There's something else," Linda said. She pulled out another folder. "I've been doing some research into Madison's finances. Public records, social media, that kind of thing. Did you know she and Derek took a 3-week vacation to Bali last year?" "No." "Cost approximately $15,000, based on the resort they stayed at and the activities they posted about. And she bought a Tesla 6 months ago. $68,000. "But she said they were drowning in debt." "They probably are, because they're living beyond their means. This isn't about survival, Robert. This is about maintaining a lifestyle they can't afford and expecting you to fund it." I felt sick and angry and sad, all at once. "What now?" I asked. "Now we prepare for court. We let her lawyer present their case, and then we show the judge who your daughter really is." As the court date approached, my life became increasingly isolated. It wasn't just strangers whispering anymore. It was people I'd known for decades. Jim Martinez, who I'd worked alongside for 20 years at the machine shop, stopped responding to my texts about our weekly poker game. When I finally caught him at the hardware store, he looked uncomfortable. "Look, Bob, the guys and we think it's better if you sit out for a while. This thing with Madison, it's awkward. Some of the guys have kids asking them for help with houses and, well, they don't want ideas." "Ideas? Jim, she's suing me." "Yeah, and maybe if you just helped her out, it wouldn't have come to that." He walked away before I could respond. The women at Patricia's book club, women who used to bring me casseroles after the divorce, who used to smile and wave when they saw me, started a petition. I found out about it from a neighbor who felt guilty enough to warn me. They were raising money for Madison's legal fees. "She's so brave," the neighbor said awkwardly. "Standing up to, well, you know." "Standing up to what? To her father who'd already given her everything?" Connor called me 2 weeks before the trial. "Dad, I need you to know I'm testifying for Madison." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "She asked me to. She's my sister, and Dad, honestly, I remember you saying you'd help her when she was ready to buy a house. I was there. We were at Sophia's graduation dinner, and Madison mentioned wanting to settle down someday, and you said something like, 'Don't worry, honey, when the time comes, Dad will help make it happen.' That was 10 years ago. She was talking about maybe getting married someday. It was just Dad talk." The judge needs to hear all sides, Connor said, and I could hear the script in his words. Madison had coached him. I'm sorry, Dad, but I have to do this. You don't have to do anything, I said. You're choosing to. He hung up. Sophia finally returned my calls 3 days later. She was crying. Daddy, I don't know what to do. Madison says if I don't support her, she'll never speak to me again. Mom is so angry with you. Connor is on her side. I feel like the family is falling apart. Sophie, honey, I didn't do anything wrong. Then why is this happening? She sobbed. Why can't you just give her some money and make this stop? Because it's not right. What she's doing isn't right. But she's your daughter, and I need to tell you something. Madison wants me to testify, too. About the things you said about helping us all be successful, about taking care of family. She says it'll help her case. My heart sank. Are you going to? A long pause. I don't want to lose my sister, Dad. What about losing your father? Another pause. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She hung up. That night, I sat in my living room with a glass of whiskey I didn't drink, staring at the family photos on the mantel. Madison at 5, missing her front teeth, sitting on my shoulders at the zoo. Connor at 10, holding up a fish we'd caught on a camping trip. Sophia at 7, dressed as a princess for Halloween, holding my hand. Patricia and I on our wedding day, young and stupid and full of hope. When had it all gone so wrong? My phone buzzed, an email from Patricia. Robert, I'm writing this because I think you need to hear it. You were never a warm father. You were always working, always focused on money and bills and practical things. You missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences. You were there physically but not emotionally. Now, when Madison needs you in a concrete, meaningful way, you're choosing money over her again. I hope you can live with that choice. I hope it keeps you warm at night, because your children won't. Don't bother responding. I just wanted you to know how I see this, how we all see this. I read it 3 times. Each time hurt more. Was she right? Had I been a bad father? I'd worked 60-hour weeks to keep a roof over their heads, food on the table, braces on their teeth. I'd sacrificed and saved and done everything I thought a father was supposed to do. But maybe I'd missed something. Maybe while I was busy providing, I'd forgotten to connect. But even if that was true, even if I'd been an imperfect father, did that mean I owed Madison $700,000? I couldn't reconcile it, and I couldn't give in. The next morning, I drove past Madison's apartment building. I don't know why. Some masochistic need to see her, maybe. To understand. To find the little girl I'd love somewhere in the woman who was destroying me. Her Tesla was in the parking garage, gleaming and perfect. Through the window of her apartment, I could see her moving around, laughing, talking on the phone. She looked happy, unburdened. While I was selling my father's belongings to pay for legal fees and lying awake at night, sick with stress, she was fine. Better than fine. This wasn't about need, it was about want, about entitlement, about a daughter who looked at her father and saw a bank account instead of a human being. I drove home and called Linda. Whatever happens in that courtroom, I'm not backing down. Good, she said, because I found one more thing, something that changes everything. The day of the hearing arrived like an execution date. I put on my only suit, a dark gray one I'd bought for my mother's funeral. It didn't fit quite right anymore. I'd lost weight over the past months, but it would have to do. Linda met me outside the courthouse. Remember, stay calm. Don't react no matter what they say. Let me handle everything. What was the thing you found? I asked. You said you had something. Later, trust me. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, oak-paneled and solemn. Madison was already there with her lawyer, Bradley Morrison, a man who looked like he played racquetball with judges and senators. She was wearing a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, makeup subtle. She looked vulnerable. Calculated vulnerability. Our eyes met for a second. She looked away first. Connor and Sophia sat in the gallery behind Madison. Patricia was there too, her hand on Madison's shoulder in a show of support that felt like a knife in my back. The bailiff announced Judge Sandra Reeves, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. She reviewed the case file in silence for what felt like an eternity. This is a civil claim, she finally said. Ms. Grant Stevens is seeking $700,000 from her father, Mr. Grant, based on alleged promises of financial support. Mr. Morrison, you may proceed with your opening statement. Bradley Morrison stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. Your Honor, this case is about more than money. It's about a father's obligation to his children, and about promises made and broken. Robert Grant is a man of substantial means. He has over $900,000 in savings and investments. He owns his home outright. He has no dependents, no significant expenses, and no financial hardship. Meanwhile, his daughter Madison, a young woman trying to establish herself and build a future, came to him asking for help to purchase a home, not a handout, but a family investment. Mr. Grant refused, despite years of indicating he would support his children when they needed him. We have testimony, we have evidence of a pattern of behavior, and we ask this court to enforce what is ultimately a family contract, an understanding that goes back decades. He spoke for another 10 minutes, painting me as a miserly father hoarding wealth while my children struggled. He made it sound reasonable, almost noble, what Madison was doing. Then it was Linda's turn. She stood slowly, deliberately. Your Honor, this case is indeed about obligation. It's about a daughter's obligation to be truthful, to be fair, and to recognize what her father has already sacrificed for her. The plaintiff wants the court to believe she's been neglected, abandoned financially. We will show that nothing could be further from the truth. Over the past 32 years, Mr. Grant has provided over $220,000 in documented support to his daughter. He paid for her education, her wedding, her cars, her medical expenses. He has been a generous father by any reasonable standard. What Ms. Grant Stevens wants is not support. It's not help. It's not family assistance. She wants her father to buy her a lifestyle she hasn't earned and cannot maintain. And when he rightfully refused, she weaponized the legal system to try to take it by force. Judge Reeves listened without expression. Mr. Morrison, call your first witness. Bradley called Madison to the stand. She walked up with her head held high, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The questioning started gently. Morrison established that Madison was a college graduate, married, and employed as a social media consultant. She talked about her childhood, about feeling like her father was always distant, always working, about how she'd promised herself she'd build a life where her own children would know security and stability. And did your father ever discuss helping you financially in the future? Morrison asked. Many times, Madison said, her voice steady. He always said family came first, that he was working so hard so we'd all be taken care of. At my college graduation, he told me, Madison, everything I have is for you kids. When you need help building your life, I'll be there. At my wedding, he said, don't worry about money, honey. Your old man has it covered. And did you rely on those promises? Of course. Why would I think my own father would lie to me? When you found a house you wanted to purchase, what did you do? I approached him like an adult. I showed him the numbers, the investment potential. I wasn't asking for a gift. The plan was for him to co-sign and provide the down payment, and Derek and I would handle the rest. It was a sound financial arrangement. And how did he respond? Madison's eyes welled up with tears. Real tears or practiced ones? I couldn't tell anymore. He said no, just flat out no. He didn't even want to discuss it. It was like I was a stranger asking for money, not his daughter. I felt so betrayed. Morrison nodded sympathetically. What did you do then? I tried talking to him several more times. I brought my mother, my siblings. Everyone told him he was being unreasonable, but he wouldn't budge. So I had to do this. I didn't want to sue my own father, but he left me no choice. No further questions, Your Honor. Linda stood for cross-examination. She approached Madison with a calm, almost friendly demeanor. Ms. Grant Stevens, you testified that your father promised to help you build your life. Is that correct? Yes. And in your mind, that promise meant he should pay for half of a $1.4 million home? That's not... Just answer the question, please. He has the money. Why shouldn't he help? We'll get to that. You also testified that you approached him like an adult with a financial proposal. Did you consider what he might need that money for? He lives alone. He doesn't need that much. I see. So you determined unilaterally what your father does and doesn't need? Morrison objected. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Reeves said. Rephrase, Ms. Chen. Ms. Grant Stevens, did you ask your father about his retirement plans? No, but did you ask about his health? Whether he might need funds for medical care? He's healthy. Did you ask if he had other financial obligations or plans for the money? No. So, when he said no, you didn't accept that answer. You brought family members to pressure him? I brought people who could help him see reason. And when that didn't work, you filed this lawsuit? I'm entitled to. We'll let the judge determine what you're entitled to. Let me ask you about your own finances. You own a Tesla, correct? Madison shifted uncomfortably. Yes. How much did that cost? I don't see how. Answer the question, please. $68,000. And you took a vacation to Bali last year? A lot of that was covered by influencer sponsorships. How much? About half. So you spent $7,500 on a vacation while claiming you're financially struggling? That was before we decided to buy the house. I see. And the designer handbag I notice on the table behind you, is that a Birkin? Morrison stood up. Your Honor, Ms. Grant Stevens' spending habits are not... Judge Reeves held up a hand. I'll allow it. The plaintiff's financial status is relevant to her claim of need. Answer the question, Ms. Grant Stevens. Madison's face was flushing. Yes, it was a gift from Derek. How much do those typically cost? I don't know exactly. Guess? Maybe. 12,000. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Linda let it sit for a moment. Ms. Grant Stevens, you testified that your father was distant, always working. Is it true he paid for your college education? Yes, but $83,000. I guess. And your wedding? Partially. $22,000? Yes. Linda walked back to our table and picked up a thick folder. Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence a complete accounting of every documented dollar Mr. Grant has given to his daughter over the past 32 years. The total is $223,472. She handed copies to the judge and to Morrison. Madison stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. No further questions, Linda said. Morrison called Connor next. My son looked miserable as he took the stand. Mr. Grant, you're the plaintiff's brother, correct? Yes. And were you present at family gatherings where your father discussed helping his children financially? Sometimes. Can you tell the court what he said? Connor glanced at me, then away. He said he wanted us all to be successful, that he was working hard so we'd have opportunities. Did he ever specifically promise to help purchase homes? Connor hesitated. Not specifically, but it was implied. Implied how? Just the way he talked, like he'd always be there for us. No further questions. Linda approached for cross-examination. Her voice was gentle. Connor, you're a teacher, correct? Yes. Has your father helped you financially? He helped with my student loans a few years ago. How much? $15,000. Did you ask him to do that? No, he just did it. Said he didn't want me struggling with debt. So he helped you without being asked, without conditions, without making you sue him? Connor's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Do you believe your father loves you? Yes. Do you believe he loves your sister? Yes. Then why are you here? Connor's eyes filled with tears. Because she's my sister. Because the family is falling apart. And I thought if I supported her, maybe we could all get past this. Even if it means supporting something that's wrong? I don't know anymore, Connor whispered. I don't know. Morrison called Sophia next, but her testimony was brief and unhelpful to his case. She spoke about family dinners and general statements I'd made, but when pressed for specifics, she couldn't provide anything concrete. I could see Morrison getting frustrated. Then Judge Reeves spoke up. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to save us all some time here. I've heard your case. Ms. Chen, you may present your defense. Linda stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Mr. Robert Grant to the stand. I walked up on shaky legs and took the oath. Linda asked me about my work history, my savings, my relationship with Madison. I answered honestly, my voice steadier than I expected. Mr. Grant, why did you refuse to give your daughter the $700,000? Because it's not help, I said. It's enabling. My daughter and her husband make good money, but they spend more than they earn. They want a house they can't afford because they've convinced themselves they deserve it. If I gave them this money, I'd be teaching them that they don't have to live within their means, that they can always come to Dad to bail them out. And I'd be giving up my security, my retirement, the savings it took me 40 years to accumulate. I love my daughter, but I won't sacrifice my future for her entitlement. No further questions. Morrison's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to make me look cold, selfish. He brought up missed birthdays, times I'd worked instead of attending school events. He painted a picture of a father who prioritized money over family. Mr. Grant, isn't it true that you have more money than you could ever spend? No, I have enough for retirement if I'm careful. You own your home. You have no mortgage. Where does all that money go? It's for my future. Medical care, emergencies, maybe a nursing home someday. It's for security. But not for your daughter's security? My daughter is 32 years old. She's responsible for her own security. That's a cold way to look at family. That's a realistic way to look at life. Morrison called one more witness, a financial expert who testified about how much money I could afford to give away while still maintaining a comfortable retirement. It was all speculation, all based on assumptions about how long I'd live and what my expenses would be. Then Linda called her witness, a forensic accountant who had reviewed Madison and Derek's finances. Based on the records I was able to obtain, Mr. and Mrs. Stevens have a combined income of approximately $210,000 per year, he testified. However, their spending exceeds $300,000 annually. They have $78,000 in credit card debt, a car payment of $1,200 per month, and regular luxury expenditures that suggest a pattern of living beyond their means. Judge Reeves leaned forward. So they're not in financial crisis? No, Your Honor. They're in a spending crisis. A $1.4 million home purchase would exacerbate their problems, not solve them. Morrison tried to discredit the testimony, but the numbers were the numbers. Finally, we reached closing arguments. Morrison gave an impassioned speech about family values and parental duty. Linda countered with facts, figures, and the law. And then Judge Reeves said something I'll never forget. Before I rule, I have one question for the plaintiff. Madison straightened, that confident smile returning to her face. Ms. Grant Stevens, where is the proof, in writing, that your father promised you this $700,000? The smile faltered. It was verbal. We discussed it many times. I'm asking about written proof, a contract, an email, a text message, anything that specifically states your father agreed to pay for half of your house. Madison looked at her lawyer. Morrison stood up. Your Honor, many family agreements are verbal. That doesn't make them less binding. Mr. Morrison, I'm not asking you. I'm asking your client. Ms. Grant Stevens? No, there's nothing in writing. But he said, What I have here, Judge Reeves interrupted, holding up the folder Linda had submitted, is written proof that your father has provided over $200,000 in support to you throughout your life. I have documented evidence of a father who has consistently helped his child, who paused with my quiet life, and I think about the question the judge asked. The one question that mattered? Where's the proof? Madison couldn't answer it then. And I can't answer the reverse now? Where's the proof I was a bad father? Where's the proof I owed her my entire life savings? Where's the proof that her struggles are my responsibility to fix? There is none. There's only the story she tells herself, and the truth I know. And that, I suppose, will have to be enough. For both of us.